Hi, Tim.
Hi there.
Sorry,
How are you?
my Zoom had to do an update.
Oh, perfect timing. So is it okay if I record this? Because that
Yeah,
just really helps me.
for
And on the same vein, is it okay if I record this and then post this or portions of this on social
yeah,
media and stuff?
yeah, sure,
Awesome.
definitely.
I just want to make that crystal clear because some people feel differently. And for me, it's all about the insights, and
Definitely.
the content is just a bonus, and hopefully a bonus for any interviewees.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
So thank you. And just so you know, you are the very first person to be booked. I've had great response, but you're the first person to be booked and the first person to
Awesome.
appear for this.
Well,
So
good. Hopefully I don't let you down.
I'm confident you will not. Okay, great. Okay, so let's do this first. Some of these questions, I'm still working on the language, but I
Okay,
think we will be fine. So,
no worries.
so I have a question for you.
Yeah,
That's a unique spelling, your name.
my name, yeah.
What's that about? Is there a story
Um,
behind that, or
there really isn't a story behind it, except for I come from a family of 9 children. So
okay?
I am third youngest of 9. So hence I started getting my experience in dealing with lots of different people right out the gate because I had, when I was born, I had 6 other siblings to contend with, and then I had 2 younger brothers that were born after me. But for some reason, my parents decided to spell all of the daughters' names with a double E on the end of them. So there's my oldest sister is Mickey, and then my next sister, Marilee, and then Mindy, and then Marcee, and we all have a double E on the end of it. So no, I
Okay.
don't know why. I think, well, I would say my mom, she definitely likes to think creatively. And so I
Hmm.
think it was more of her way of just being kind of creative with our names. So
I like that. I'm really glad I asked that question because
yeah,
it's telling. Because the first thing I thought, oh, it's just creative expression with language.
yeah, yeah,
I can respect that. I appreciate that. I love wordplay.
yeah.
So, what I want to do is I actually want to fire off questions first because as much as I actually love the human and personal specific stuff, it could be like, oh, we've just spent 2 hours. We better ask those questions. So I want to start with the questions
Yes.
so that we have discretion as to the time after. So the first one is, what are the most significant challenges you face in fostering sort of positive and effective leadership?
So, I think for me, the challenge would be, and I'll say this as I began, as I like when I was a new leader, I've been in leadership for over 25 years. And so I've had
Hmm.
lots of experiences. But when I came into leadership roles in the beginning, I did not factor in the human factor. I, was going by the book of what I'd read and what I'd learned from school and what I thought I knew, and not factoring in that every interaction I was going to have as a leader, there was a human being on the other side of it. And I had zero control into how they were going to react to what I was, setting in front of them. And so for
Hmm.
me, that was one of the biggest things, was to start to understand that there is a human being on the other side of this. And so I need to do all I can to diligently learn about humans and to try to understand their thought process. Of course, if for any reason I was going to try to inspire or motivate anyone to do anything, then I needed to know how to come to them on their level in order
Hmm.
to be able to get that out of them. So it was interesting for me because I know who I am and I know how I function, and I know what type of person I am, and I know how to make that person move forward. but that was all I was familiar with. And so then I realized, oh, yeah, I've got to adjust. And it was and sometimes as a leader, you start in and you're like, no, everybody needs to do it the way that I say they need to do it. I'm the leader. I'm the boss. I'm the one who's in charge. And very quickly, I realized, no, that's not how it works. And it was interesting because a lot of that I actually pulled from my childhood, from growing up with 8 other siblings. And then from being a parent, you learn really quickly. I have 4 children, each one of them very different personalities. They have very different ways of doing things. And I can't ask one of them to do their chores in the same way that I asked the other one. And so I had to figure out, if I wanted them to do their chores, I had to figure out how I was going to inspire and motivate them, each individual, to do their chores. And I took that into the workplace with me and realized, oh, we're all just the same. We're just human beings going through this experience. And so I'm going to need to adjust my message to each individual person in the work.
Right. I love that. We skipped out there for a moment, so I hopefully that isn't on the recording, but I don't think I missed anything significant. I love your answer, and in the work I do, it's very similar because I focus on like cognitive neuroscience, but it doesn't feel like that. It is, this is informing what real humans go through and how real humans are. So if you know who Andrew Huberman is, he talks about this stuff a whole ton. He's like a Harvard professor. You know who he is?
Yes.
Well, high five to you. Love that. And the practices aren't anything mysterious. He can just go into the weeds for you, and I can to a lesser degree.
Yeah.
But it really comes out to, if this isn't usable and it isn't tailored to the individual or group you're dealing with, it is by definition useless, which is why I hate the idea. We have this program that works for everybody. Either, in my very direct and honest opinion, you have no clue what you're talking about, or you do, but you're lying because the work of actually making it personalized is too much, and you're more about the money and less about the results.
Yeah, 100%.
Gotta be honest.
I agree. Absolutely.
I'm going to give a personal injection into what you said, because we were talking about kids being different.
Yeah.
Many years ago, my father gave this insight to us, talking about something he learned from his mother. Also a big family, to the factor of my father had 4 brothers and 10 sisters.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And her motherly insight was, no 2 of my children are the same. They are all different, and that's what you have to be aware of to be a good parent and a good leader in the family. I just want to mention something else, which is totally random. I have these LED lights. So if the light color changes to any crazy color or changes in intensity, you are not having a seizure. It's just unfortunate when the programming kind of comes loose. You know, you do a setting, but if it comes loose, it does whatever it wants. So that's, it's not a disco and you're not having a seizure.
Okay.
So let's move on to the other question. I love what you said, because ultimately, and as also somebody who's now lived in Asia since the end of 2005, absolutely, on the most fundamental level, people are individuals and yet fundamentally the same. And you need both of those variables to understand how to lead anybody, including yourself, really.
100%.
Okay. So the next one is, can you describe a recent situation where you felt that your leadership, or let me put it another way. I'm sort of having to rewrite this in my head because some of the phrasing I don't like.
That's okay.
Could have benefited from some other kind of guidance or culture building. So either yourself or those you lead, it was like, we really need to sort of bring somebody up to speed on how to do this, especially with respect to culture specifically. Like leadership and culture to me can't really be disentangled, in that good leadership is good culture building simultaneously.
Yeah, absolutely. Where I've experienced it the most, happened to be as we were coming out of the pandemic. Before the pandemic, so I worked in the airline industry, and
Hmm.
and as you know, the airline industry was hit very hard during the pandemic, and essentially we had to cut back our workforce a lot, like almost two-thirds of our workforce left the company. And so then on the flip side of it, the travel industry recovered really quickly there during when we started to come out of the pandemic. And so travel returned way quicker than we were expecting it to. And so we had to start putting people into positions quicker than we would have ever anticipated. And it left us with putting people into positions who weren't necessarily ready for, and specifically in leadership positions. And so during that time, I recognized that I didn't have the luxury of, just being able to hire somebody who already had what they need to be a leader. I was going to need to take the time to provide them that training. And it was tough because there was a lot of things happening, and I could, just put those people in place and just hope for the best. And as we started going through that, I quickly realized that by just having people there, that wasn't enough. There were some skills that needed to be taught and needed to be learned. And so for my team, it was really important to me that I take them offsite, take them away from what we were doing on a daily basis for a couple days, and just help give them the foundations of leadership. Otherwise, they were just floundering, and as we were hearing back from our employees, they were frustrated and they didn't feel like they had the support they needed, and they were, lacking the supervision or the leadership that they wanted. And so it was just, kind of a big ball of chaos there for a little bit. And so one of the best things I was able to do for that was just remove everybody from the situation, and just take some time with them, and hone in on, some of those skills that are really important in leadership. And it made a huge difference. We were able to, of course, we kept it as an ongoing series, and we would make sure that we were checking in with them, and continuing to talk about how those skills were working. But definitely it was needed to just take that pause for a minute and make sure that we just kind of realigned with all these new leaders that were coming into place.
I like that. I like the pause and realign. And I liked when you were talking about taking them out of the context, which from a psychological point of view, because that's my background, from the
Yeah.
neuroscience point of view, they have a lot of associations with, I'm here, I feel out of control, drowning in anxiety, because it's like, they didn't train me to do this, and I've never
Yeah.
done this before. So
Yeah.
as many times former employee, I find it shocking that many companies say, well, this guy who's been here a while, or this gal
Yeah.
who's been here for a while, they know how to do it. Go work with them and they'll train you up. And it's sort of like, well, hold on. As a now almost 2 decades, 16, 17 years of teaching, and this is C-suite executives through to 2-year-olds, which aren't especially different in some very fundamental ways. In others, yes, but in some, no.
Yeah.
And it leaves me with this shocking insight from my experience teaching. Is like, why do people confuse being able to do something with being able to teach something?
Yes.
They are two fundamentally different skills,
100%.
and you could be the best doer, the best practitioner, and an incompetent or tyrannical or fantastic teacher, but
Yeah.
they are not the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree. So I think so many times in business that happens, that we just pair somebody up with another person that is doing the job, and we hope that that's going to transfer over. And that's all we're doing is hoping. And we really aren't setting anybody up for success.
Right. In fact, yeah, I think it leaves a real danger of setting two people up for failure, and
Yes.
then you can't be surprised if suddenly you find yourself two people short on your human resources.
Yes.
I'm really direct when I speak with people and when I write my articles and stuff. It's sort of like, even if it may not be your responsibility that X has happened, or sorry, I said it backwards here. It may not be your fault that the situation is as it is, but it is your responsibility. So as a leader, it's sort of like, maybe the training has, to put it plainly, sucked in the past, and maybe you can't provide that training now, but it is your responsibility, even if it isn't your fault.
Yeah.
You're the leader.
Yeah.
Don't expect great results if you don't give great training.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. Yeah, I agree.
Arigato. I say the same thing when it comes to sort of evolutionary things, right? It's like, okay, some people say, well, I'm really challenged. I'd rather stay home and watch Netflix and eat cookies. It's like, well, that's actually species wide. We all would love to be doing things the easy way and getting the fantastic results without the work. That's our evolutionary default. It's not our fault, but it's our responsibility. And we
Yeah.
do have the choice to do something about it. Is it hard? It's hard for everybody. You're not special if you think it's hard for you. It's hard for everybody. So the next question here, sort of, what specific outcomes do you hope to achieve through what we've been talking about, leadership training or sort of preparation? What are the sort of, especially the culture focused stuff that you would want to see coming out of your training?
Yeah. So for me, the thing that I've observed over my years of experience is there's a really amazing worker. They're really great at doing their thing. As an individual contributor, they do amazing. And then there comes this point where we decide we want to recognize them for doing so great. And so we promote them. And usually that promotion is putting them in a leadership position. Now, do they know anything about leadership, or have they learned anything about leadership? Not necessarily, but that's the next step. That's where you get promoted to. So let's promote them to it. And then they go into that position and they don't know. They are really great at telling people how they did as an individual contributor. And I can tell you how I got my work done, but that's as far as it goes. I don't know much else about how to help inspire or motivate you to want to do well in what you're doing. And from there, then we get some, chaos that starts to happen in the business place, and people start to be frustrated, and they, start to not want to work there any longer because their leader doesn't listen to them, or their leader doesn't communicate with them, or they don't feel like they are given opportunities. But their leader was put in a position to not really know how to be a leader. And I think that's an area that we were really struggling in, is that we have got to recognize as organizations that leadership isn't just natural in everybody. It requires some training, and it requires some skill, somebody taking you aside and teaching you these skills, and you being able to practice those skills and going back for feedback around those. And so for me, I think it's just extremely important that we get some type of, foundational leadership experience, and we teach this next generation of leaders those skills that are going to help them to be able to become leaders. And then checking back in with them often and making sure that they are headed on that right path. They're going to have a lot of questions along the way, and they're going to need somebody who can give them that corrective feedback or that supportive feedback. And so I think that that's the piece that I feel like is really necessary in organizations if we're going to be able to make this work for us. It's also interesting too. I've done quite a bit of research around this next generation that's coming up, and they kind of call us on our BS. They really don't put up with it. And they also aren't going to stick around with a company for very long if they feel like it's not headed in the right direction. They have also found that they can actually just go out and drive Uber if they want to, and they can make some money. Or they can go and do DoorDash and they can make some money. Or they can stream video games online and make $70,000, and they're good with that, and it's fine if that means that they're not going to have to put up with the BS that happens in some organization. And so if we're going to want to be able to develop that next generation of leaders, we have got to get people in a place where they know how to motivate and inspire them.
Nice. I love that. I actually listened to a book recently, which I left a not kind, but entirely honest review. And it was about Gen Y and Z. I'm an elder Gen Xer. I'm 56 now.
Yeah.
So the stereotypes, both positive and negative, are inherently true in my experience. That is, they are, and this could get me a lot of hate, but I'm going to say it anyway. They are indeed the crybaby cultures of all generations. And I mean that. At the same time, that's both the strength and the weakness that it is. What you were talking about them calling the BS, that's the strength they have, that most of it's just like, sit down, shut up, they're the boss. Where we need that, and I'm glad that's being called out, they also have their own space they need to be strengthened or supported or taught to do, because as much as it's really important for people to feel their feelings, it is the workplace. It is a situation in which it really isn't all about you and your feelings, and you may be uncomfortable, but growth in anything involves discomfort. So if your default, regardless of what generation it is I'm just going to avoid anything that's uncomfortable, well, then that's the equivalent to saying, I don't want to grow, or I don't want to be more successful at this thing. Even if it's streaming videos, the person who makes 70 grand a year is still probably the exception. And the kind of feedback they're going to get is a lot less diplomatic than your average boss would give them, even if they are unskilled, unless they're tyrannical.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. I love that.
When I say too that that they want, I don't know that this generation really turns away from being uncomfortable as much. If you think about what they've grown up in, it's all been uncomfortable. I mean, they started out in a world after 9/11, and there has not been much in their lives that has been comfortable. It's been one thing after another, after another, after another. I think it's more that they just require somebody who is going to adapt to what they need and have an expectation of that. And which I think is what we need of our leaders. I think we should have an expectation of our leaders to adapt their style to what I need. And I don't even know if it's about, feelings being hurt or anything. It's more about, I need you to communicate with me in the way that I understand. And I need you to listen to me in the way that is going to help you to hear what I'm saying. And so just requiring a little bit extra in our leaders is really what I'm pushing for.
Right. And I agree with that. I know I have sort of, I'm so direct and honest that it's not necessarily always good, but people tend to, once they get to know me, they realize I might not like what Tim has to say, but I trust him. And in almost without exception, this is what I think you need to hear to make you better.
Yeah.
Because if we get too politically correct,
Yeah.
And then we assume they read between the lines to save their feelings. It's like in the real world, we need to be able to practice things like radical honesty,
Yes.
but that is so separate from being a jerk. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Bob Sutton, but he has a book. And since I'm the host here, I don't care if you swear, by the way. I don't do a lot of it, but his book, The No Asshole Rule, kind of gets to the gist of it.
Yes. Yes.
So we can disagree without being disagreeable.
Yes. Agreed.
So next one, 4 of 10 or 11. I hope we have enough time to do this. Are you okay for time?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Yep.
Awesome. So let's keep moving forward. In your opinion, what are the key skills and competencies that leaders should possess to create a thriving organizational culture?
So I think that there's a long list of things that we should have as leaders. And I think sometimes that long list can get overwhelming to people. I was extremely lucky that I worked for a company who had an amazing culture. And they also in that encouraged, more of a servant type leadership. And that's really where they came from and what, taught their leaders to be. And so I had a really great, of learning that type of leadership. But for me, the most important things, communication being number one. I think that communication is so important in that as a leader, you have got to learn how to communicate with many different people, and you have to be able to adjust your communication to those people. I think it's always interesting to me how people throw a message out there and then they're frustrated because nobody's listening to them. And I feel like it is our responsibility to adjust that message. If I want somebody to hear what I'm saying, I have to make sure that they are able to hear what I'm saying. And so adjusting that message to all of these different people on my team, that's really important to me. Another one is influence. I think that it is really important for our leaders to understand how to influence people. And this isn't necessarily, how to trick people into believing what you want them to believe, but it's influencing people to get the things done that you need to get done, and trying to help them understand what is the impact of what it is that you're going to be accomplishing. So I think that that's a really great skill. The other one is around feedback. I think that you have got to be able to have a relationship with the people that you're leading, that there is feedback coming back and forth. I am not a fan of saying negative and positive feedback. I like to frame it as supportive and corrective feedback.
Nice.
I think negative and positive gets kind of yucky feeling. And I don't think there's one person in the world that likes to hear negative feedback because it starts with the word negative. And so I reframe that as corrective. I learned that from my dad. My dad was a farmer, and for 50 years, he owned a farm and he was a farmer. And my dad could tell anyone anything. He could give them any type of feedback, and they would turn around and they would thank him for it because of the approach that he took. Because people always knew that he genuinely cared about how they were doing and how they were performing. And he came at that from that place of genuine care. And so that's something that I adopted that I feel like is so important, is if you are going to provide somebody feedback, it should never leave them feeling in despair. It should leave them feeling energized to want to go and apply whatever feedback you've just shared with them. I could go on and on, but I think a couple others, coaching, you've got to have that ability to be able to be a coach. I'm super into sports. I love to watch sports, especially college football. It's one of my very favorite. I watch that with my husband. And if you ever watch those coaches, they're not standing on the sidelines, just demure and quiet. In most, sports, you watch soccer, you watch basketball, those coaches aren't just sitting there, with their hands underneath. They are up there and they are yelling and they're screaming and they're, letting the players know what's happening, and they're advocating for the players with the referees, and they are up there and they are active. And so that to me is a really great leadership quality. You need to be running along the sidelines with your players and giving them that feedback in the moment and helping them and encouraging them and cheering for them when things go well, and also calling them out when they do something that doesn't work out. So
I love that.
I think that's a really good one too.
So,
those are just mine.
Okay, a couple things come to mind. First of all, your father was a leadership and EQ genius. And in a sense, you're damn lucky that you had it, because it's like farmer. It's not the top person I think of as somebody who would be great for giving feedback. But to quote Ed Catmull, I have this top of mind because I just did a video on it. It was like, inspiration can and does come from anywhere.
Yep.
He updated his book Creativity Inc. and he talked about that gist. It was like, don't be so arrogant as to think that the person who arrived today, who might have been in high school yesterday, couldn't have an idea. Let's hear that idea first and then determine whether it has any value. And if it doesn't, again, you can give them supportive or corrective feedback. And I'm going to steal that from you and your dad. Awesome. Because I love it that much. And I sort of do the same thing in my own head. Like, I've had a lot of feedback on my videos, which are doing terrible for whatever reason. And I don't have to like it, but the bottom line is there's something I need to do differently. Otherwise, I would see different results. So it's been, sometimes I don't like to hear what it is, but I'm actually grateful and happy to hear it, because it's like, finally, somebody will tell me the hard truth that nobody does, because they're worried about hurting my feelings. Like, hurt my all you want. You don't have to if you do it well.
Yes.
But I would rather you leave me in a puddle of tears, which is damn near impossible, than to tell me I'm great and give me a high five for getting that 8th place trophy.
Yeah.
Which is actually a harmful thing to people, not a good thing.
And Tim, isn't that amazing? The person who took the time to actually care enough about your video to provide you that feedback, that means something. We're all so busy. We're all out there going. And so if somebody took some time to watch your video and then, analyze it and then give you feedback around it, that means something. And sometimes it can be hard to hear, because, we're all trying and doing our best, and we're hoping that we're putting out the best product. But of course, you're just learning, and you're just, this is something that you're going through, and you're not going to do it perfect. And so, so value that somebody took that time to give
I
you.
do. In fact, I would say I probably wouldn't be overstating it. I say nothing is everything, and that's true, right? Like, somebody says, oh, mindset is everything. It's crucial, but it's far from everything. But as close as I can say that, somebody taking that time does mean pretty damn close to everything to me. And when we're talking about culture building, this loops back into that really powerfully. It was like, I can tell you about a man who is probably now deceased, because the last time I saw them, they were already an adult and I was still a teenager. But the reason I know the name Dennis Sosnowski, my grade 5 teacher, is because for no reason at all, he came from the school where he was teaching, River Glen in Red Deer, which is like a junior high school. He came over to Lindsay Thurber Composite High School to watch me do long jump in the county track meet. And I remember that today. And this was, this was 40 years ago. And I remember that event fondly. So talk about culture building. When somebody takes the time
Yeah.
to give a crap about something when nobody else is watching. And
Yeah.
for him, it might not have meant that much. It's like, oh, Tim's here, I'm going to go check it out. But it really doesn't matter because, like I said, 40 years later, that's still an exceptional experience. And an experience like that in the workplace from your boss or any leader, it's like now you have love for them that they'll be talking about 40 years later because of a tiny gesture.
Yeah.
Even if it took 5 seconds to say, well, maybe you should just lower your voice or slow down your speaking cadence when you're saying that because
Yeah.
it's upsetting people when you talk like that.
Absolutely. I love that.
Yeah. So, and the other thing that comes to my brain when you say that is the self-help industry. That is the unethical version, which is, as far as I'm concerned, most of it, basically wants to put out the message, you're broken, pay me and I can fix you.
Yeah.
Versus I love alliteration. So to me, it's like progress, not perfection. We're imperfect, not broken.
Yeah. I love that.
So the next one, and thank you, because I don't agree with people for the sake of agreeing. I think that's sort of insulting, disrespectful, and disingenuous. I'm, as you might have guessed, kind of a straightforward person.
I like it.
So when I say I agree with you, I actually mean it. And
Well,
I know, unfortunately, in the world we live in, people go, yeah, but everybody says everybody's awesome all the time. And unfortunately, that's true. Do you remember The Incredibles?
Yes. The cartoon?
Yes. Do you remember what Dashiell said? That is the son Dash, when his mom says, "Oh, but something about him being special." I don't remember the exact thing. Do you remember his reply?
I don't know that I remember it specifically.
I love this, and it could be wrong, but the essence is there is like, Mom, saying everybody is special is the same as saying nobody is special.
Yes, that's so true.
It is, and we rob people, and I'm talking personally, not just in the leadership context. If people who say everything you do is awesome, even young children, I teach children as young as 2 years old. Well, quite quickly, you're full of crap when everything they do is high five worthy or dance worthy or singing or clapping worthy. They learn immediately. It's just part of our fundamental neurological nature. If that becomes the always thing, it loses impact.
Yes.
I used to use a laser with these youngest kids, right? So they're like zero learners. They know no English. So I teach English here still. And it was like, okay, you can't touch them, which is usually good because you can high five. All these rules because of COVID. And it was like, I'm going to invent something which I came to call the laser touch. I stand in front of them and I look at them, and they understand through repeated, the same sequence happening every single class, that they have to say, I'm here, because saying their names they've done. So it's like, I'm here, because they had trouble saying, they just say, I'm here. We got to do better. But even a 2-year-old understands, if you're consistent with your reinforcement or your positive feedback, when it's true, that they understand that no effort equals no laser touch. So I'd point the laser at the floor after they tried, pass or fail, because there's no real fail, right? So it's just like, if they tried at their level, everyone is like, if for them that was success, which is individual, as you pointed out. If they gave me anything equivalent to the best I've seen before, or what's real effort for them, or any more, they absolutely got that laser. And if they just sort of looked away, like, I'm owed that laser, put that here right now.
Yeah.
It didn't even matter that they were 2 years old. It didn't matter to me if the other support teachers thought I was mean for not giving it to them. I was like, you get rewarded for trying. I don't care how old you are. And they not only loved me, but they all understood no try, no fun or reward for not trying.
Yeah. Yeah.
So false praise it makes everything you say, I was like, yeah, you always say that. It doesn't mean anything anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the next one is, would you define how would you define the ideal duration for sort of leadership training? Because you talked about that, doing an offsite, getting them out of the context
Yeah.
where you can dissociate from the stress of drowning in their lack of leadership skill, which isn't their fault. It's the leader's fault or the HR's fault, whoever's responsible for training them. What would you say is sort of like an optimal or a good range in terms of the duration of a course and the results you got?
Yeah. So, I think that as leaders, you need to be lifelong leaders, learners. I think that it's our responsibility to always be trying to learn those skills, and I think it takes a long time. And like I said, I've had over 25 years of leadership experience, but I'm still learning, every day. And of course, I take that upon myself. Like, it's important to me, if somebody is going to allow me to have stewardship over others and their development, then it is my responsibility to make sure that I am developing myself to be the type of leader that I need to be. But I do think there's some things you can do to jumpstart that and to give people a good foundation. Now, when I was in college and, taking business courses and working on my degrees and stuff, it was, all theoretical, and it was, it was fine reading about it, but, and you can read about all those leadership skills, but until I get put in front of another human being who reacts to things and actually have those practical situations, then it's very different experience. And so I think that once someone is put in that position to have stewardship over other people, I think that that's a good time to give them a good foundation. So, like, for me, the program that I have put together is, 2 days of, learning some of these basic foundational skills for leadership. Like I talked about, the communication, the influence, the coaching, the conflict resolution, feedback, those kinds of things that are going to help you to have that good foundation. And then you have to be able to go back and start applying those to real life situations. And then you need to have somebody that you can talk to, a mentor, a coach, somebody that you can talk to about these situations as they come up, because again, you're dealing with human beings. And so everything that you've learned, you really don't know how other people are going to fully react to it. And so being able to get that corrective and supportive feedback as you're going along, I think that is really helpful. And like for me, a good 90 days of this back and forth. And then, I always like to finalize it with another session of, look what you've learned, look what you've been able to accomplish and been able to do over this time, and talk about some of those, wins. And then I think you're, set on your path of what's, what does the lifelong learning of this look like? And, I think that, a good 90 days to get a good foundation is really helpful. And then again, I think, taking it upon yourself to make sure that you have that continuous learning is really, really important. Oh, I think you're muted. You're good.
Awesome. So I love what you're saying. And I was just saying that I'm sort of trying to encapsulate as much as I can while listening and typing. I really loved what you said, because you were talking about, when you said lifelong, I was like, oh, I don't think she got the question. And then you kept speaking. I was like, okay, you got it. Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I listen to an average of a book or so a week, and that's nothing special, because my big secret is I listen, and there's so many times I can listen where it wouldn't be safe to read.
Yeah.
So I quadrupled my book consumption as soon as I went to listening exclusively. As like, unless I have no choice, I don't read books anymore. I listen because I can do them while doing so many other things.
Yeah. I'm the exact exact same way, excuse me. The one thing though is I always buy the book also because I have to go just for me and how I remember things. When I have something that like really stands out to me, I have to go back and read it and outline it and write some notes next to it
Mhm.
and physically do that because then it sticks in my brain. That's just the way that it works for me. But yeah,
Right.
we can get a lot done by listening.
Right. A strategy that I use that's related to that, because what you're talking about is really deep level processing. That is not just hearing the information and regurgitating. I always tell my students, understand, don't memorize. That
Yes.
is, if you can meaningfully reflect on and or better yet, apply what you've just learned, then you don't have to sit there and memorize. Memorization is superficial and largely useless because it's like, I can
Yeah.
hold a screwdriver like a hammer, but it's going to be terribly unsuccessful at hammering nails.
Yes.
And a hammer is pretty damn useless at driving a screwdriver. So I totally agree. I want to share this with you just because it's relevant.
Yeah.
Another thing you can do if you have time and availability, because I don't do what you do, though the deep level processing is totally valid from that whole
Yeah.
neuroscience thing, is pause your book, uh, speech to text, put notes on the audio book is one more, and then that also gives you the opportunity to loop back to that section later.
I love that. That's really
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
So it's like
Great. Yeah, I love it.
pause, bookmark, take note, blah,
Yes.
blah, 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 blah. Even if it's not perfect, you've marked that part.
Yeah.
And because you're putting in the additional effort, there's an inverse relationship between the effort you put into something and the amount of it that you absorb and understand. So, of course, to understand something more deeply takes more effort. If it was effortless, then you forget it.
Yes. I love it. Great tip, Tim. Thanks.
Oh, you're very welcome. Just in case you hadn't guessed, I am also a lifelong learner. I've kind of got it scheduled. The day after I'm dead, I'll stop learning. That's pretty much it.
That's my plan too.
I love that you talked about the idea of two things that were really resonated with me, and that was one, a 2-day offsite. I assume you mean 2-day, because I think you mean offsite from what you previously
Yep.
said, yeah?
Yep.
Intensive 2-day offsite with 90 days of ongoing support as needed.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
fantastic. The reason this is sort of ironic is, I'm thinking about building a course, and knowing a good number is obviously useful, especially an empirically derived number.
Yeah.
But where my heart really lies, because I am a teacher and lifelong learner, is that ongoing component. So it was like, oh, so that directs exactly into what I'm aspiring to do, which
Yes.
is a mastermind. Because again, when we dump the cookie cutter, no matter how well we understand those principles, say the principles of influence, since you mentioned them from
Yep.
Robert Cialdini, reading the book and understanding it deeply has nothing to do with, in this situation, how can I ethically persuade or inspire someone to do X? And
Yep.
then having outside perspectives, ideally multiple outside perspectives, to say, have you thought about this? Because I guarantee you someone will have something, either a new perspective that you've been down that path, but you didn't think of
Yep.
that, or it was like, why didn't I think of it? And
Yep.
I can attest to this really well in one way. This whole idea of doing these interviews, as obvious as it was, came from an outside person because I was too close to it. It was like,
Okay.
here's two things you need to do right now to move forward as to what you're doing. And I'm so excited about it because I'm social. So
Yes.
this is actually really fits with me. Okay, so the next one
I love
is
that.
this. What factors would influence, say, your decision around um, a course or training? That is, what variables would you use to decide this is the right way to do it? Because you obviously have history with that.
Yeah.
Would it specifically be your experience, or would you have other variables you would integrate to say, well, somebody's telling me a different approach, say from a mastermind group,
Yeah.
from your own personal mastermind colleagues, And they says, well, why don't we do this? So what would sort of influence your decisions to move away from or modify? What variables would matter to you most in terms of setting up a training?
Yeah. So for me, it has to be about what the people, what people need. I can get up in front of a group and I can, teach all day, all along. And there may only be, one person that any of that even resonates with. And so for me, it needs to be, I need to fully understand. And so I, I take time to do some analysis around what they're needing, specifically through interviewing, just like what you're doing here, interviewing people and asking them what their level is, where they're at, some of the things that they're struggling with, and some surveys around, that they can take some time to really think about their questions and answer and put some thought into, and just understanding, what is the need, what is currently going on. And then the other piece of that is serving the people that they're leading. I think that's sometimes one that we keep out of the equation, and I think it needs to be brought into it because they're actually the recipients of all of this. And so making sure and understanding, what are you lacking from your leadership? What is not happening from your manager, your boss? What is the thing that you go home at night and you're frustrated and you say to your, family around the dinner table, oh, I'm just so, frustrated that this is happening at work. What is that thing? And that's the thing I want to understand. So then I can teach leaders how to, better handle things so that that's not happening, so that their employees are not going home at night frustrated and saying, oh, if only my leader would do this. What are those things? So
I love that. I love that. Yeah, like self-awareness is, uh, um, Daniel Kahneman talks about a lot of this, right? Because he's the god of human judgment. And in his book Noise, he talks about, he says, you can go basically as far as something that they call dialectical bootstrapping, which is an unnecessarily complex term for giving yourself your own second opinion by approaching something and then waiting a certain amount of time. And there's one other approach, but the idea is, according to the statistics and the research, at best, you can give yourself 1.5 opinions. You can never give yourself a second opinion. So I really love the idea. Is like, okay, so what, especially if you're getting an outside opinion, what do you as the person who's going to be delivering it need? And the whole servant leadership, just the idea, remember, it's delivered to the audience for their benefit, not for your convenience in the way you think it should be delivered. What do they need?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Okay, we're getting there. Let me know if the time, I want to try to
I'm doing
talk
okay
less.
so far, so you're good.
I need to strive to talk less and get these questions finished more. But as you can tell, I'm
It's
kind of
good
an active and
conversation.
arigato. I'm an active and passionate person about what I care about. I would be the guy on the sidelines if I were a sports coach, doing a lot of gesturing and communicating. So what formats or delivery methods do you think are sort of best? Now, you've already answered this question as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
My psychic powers did not allow me to anticipate that, which is why we're doing this thing here. But what would be other possible ways, other than the 2-day intensive, because sometimes that's not going to be an option, that you think would be other less ideal but more optimal delivery methods for this kind of training that you're talking about? Especially how could you convert, sorry to keep going, but I want to make this super clear. How could you convert that ideal 2-day offsite into some other delivery format, which is like, this isn't ideal, but it's as close as we can get under the conditions like you described, right? It was like you didn't have time to take those brand new leaders away for 2 days because you had to scale up. and they had to be leaders right now. So
Yeah. Yeah.
what would be the ideal or the optimal compromise to deliver that training you're describing?
Yeah. No, it's a really great question. And one that I've thought about often. One of the things that I've considered is some type of video series where, I teach the concept and then allow them to, view it when it works best for them. But I found also with that, there has to be some point of accountability around it. Just because we allow everybody to, take up our time. And so, I'm all about making a firm commitment of this is on your calendar and you will be watching this video for this hour. And this is when you're doing it. And then, on top of that hour, there has to be coming together in some type of group to discuss and talk about it, because it helps you to, when you know that you're going to be meeting with other people and you're going to get called out and questioned about what you were supposed to do, and have a little bit of homework, you're going to prepare, because you don't necessarily want to look like an idiot and like, I'm the only one who didn't do this. And so just kind of going off of people's own fears of not wanting to look dumb in front of everybody else, making sure that you show up, prepared and then ready to discuss. And then I think that discussion, that conversation that you could have together could be so, empowering and impactful for the people that are there, because you're going to hear so many different perspectives of what they've just viewed. And so I think that, to me, that would probably be a second best solution. Definitely understanding time is a killer, and and none of us have nearly enough of it. But I think that other big thing is just stressing with, you know, upper leadership or executive leadership of how important this is. Like, you cannot not train your people in leadership. You just cannot leave that on the wayside. If you do, you are going to be sitting with all of the organizations that are dealing with 82% of their people not liking their leader, or not liking, and I wouldn't even use the word leader, because that's not, the person isn't a leader, not liking their manager or their boss, and considering leaving the organization because of that. That number is way too big for us to just leave that sitting off to the side and hope that it just fixes itself. It's not going to happen.
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, there's a large difference between I'm the leader because of my position, where I sit in the org chart is like, no, now this is a long time ago. I don't remember which book, but it was one of the ones by a group called, of course, it's going to escape me now. They did a book called Change Anything. So it's like, they're gone. They're gone. But it's a fantastic book, and it talks about specifically that too, that being somebody who, one of the books was actually called Influencers. That was one of the books they did. Vital Smarts is the company. I can't remember the authors off the top of my head, but they talk about how it could be the janitor, could be an influencer, that is somebody who is respected and listened to because they know something, just like your dad. Your dad, it wasn't his position that allowed him to be a leader. It was his skills that allowed him to be a leader, rather than the person you're forced to listen to, who is not, as you said, a manager or a boss, but a leader would be an overly generous statement. I love that. Okay. And I really love the accountability part of it. And you tapped back into that group genius thing. Right? Accountability, commitment, and consistency, and other things that come up where you're going to get busted. So go ahead, do your lessons even asynchronously, but then there's going to be a checking of your understanding as well as support to improve your understanding. So you can't just say, yeah, I did it, and then expect that would be okay. It's like, this isn't optional. It's flexible, but it's not optional. You got to do this.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Next one is when it comes to investing in leadership development. Now, whether that's time, that's either time, money, or resources, and they're all really resources.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, what criteria do you consider when determining sort of the value of the course? Now, that may be money,
Yep.
that may be opportunity costs, that may be time, but what would you use as the metrics to determine the value of a course?
So interesting enough, I go back to that statistic that I shared with you, just on my previous question
Mm-hmm.
around 82% of employees consider quitting their jobs because of their boss or their manager. And that right there, like having to replace that many people, whether they leave or not, if they're still not plugged in, if they are not feeling the support from their leadership, they're still not plugged in. They're not producing at the level that they could be producing. And so the amount of money that is costing your organization right there, you, I mean, it's huge. It's huge. And so for me to like be able to take some time and put your people through some leadership training, that right there, I don't even know that you could put a cost around it, because it will save so much on the other side of having employees who are actually engaged in the organization and they don't leave, and you don't have to rehire and keep rehiring and rehiring and retraining and retraining.
Right.
Instead, you just start from the very beginning with good, strong leaders who actually keep people in place.
Yeah, well, it's something that I play with words a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and to try to make things clear, it was like attract, find, filter, foster, and retain are
Yeah.
sort of the words that are coming to me, or that have come to me over time in adjusting my marketing and my communication for this thing. And while you were talking about it, I was thinking about Gallup. Like
Mhm.
68% of people are either neither engaged or disengaged, or actively disengaged.
Yep.
That's way too much. Another thing that popped up was some calculations by consultancies in that say it's 50%, the cost of replacing an experienced employee is 50 to 100% of their yearly wage.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you want some numbers, there they are. And something that Amazon does, and they're far from famous for being great in terms of treating their employees well,
Yeah.
even they, because they, as far as I'm concerned, almost entirely care about making money, not their culture and how they treat people. I know that's a polarizing position. Bottom line is, even when you're only greedy, they have valued, when I last looked, and this comes from Cialdini's most recent version of Influence. Great. If you've read the first one, throw it out, get the new one, because it's that much better. And I rarely say that. It's like, oh, it's an update. It's better, but it's fantastically better
Awesome.
and
Awesome.
rather longer. He talked about how Amazon once a year will say, look, I will pay you. Marcee, how you feeling about your job? Oh, it's okay. What if I gave you $5,000 right now to quit?
Wow.
Full stop. So what they've done is they've looked at it, and even though that number is much smaller, which is not surprising given the culture there about frugality, even the cheapskate, fairly exploitive organization is saying it's worth at least $5,000 to have you leave because of all the money it saves, because all the lost value and discretionary time and effort you will not give us if you're significantly unhappy.
Wow.
And that's on the extreme low end from a company who
Yeah.
calculates everything. So if
Yeah.
they calculate everything, they're saying it's at least worth 5,000, and it's probably worth 5 or 10 times that to
Yeah.
just pay people to leave, rather than, it's like the idea, right? What is worse, having somebody get upset and quit, or stay upset and stay? The cost
Yeah.
to your company of retaining undesirable retention of employees,
Yeah.
or failing to have desirable turnover, is, as you said, pretty much incalculable.
Yeah. I
So
love that. So good.
Next one is, when it comes to investing in leadership development, what criteria, this seems like the same question to me, but let me read it back again anyway. What criteria do you consider when determining, oh, excuse me, I just didn't write any notes. I was too busy listening, and it's like your answer was incalculable, but valuable. Okay, next one. Can you just share your thoughts on the frequency of coaching in terms of, again, this obviously extracts out of the 2-day intensive.
Yeah.
So the frequency of coaching, whether that's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, that sort of would best align. And, don't limit it to those frequencies. Whatever frequency you think is ideal when you're talking about something that's more protracted, like not a 2-day intensive.
Yeah. So I think in the beginning, I think it is really important that somebody is meeting with you on a weekly basis, and having those conversations, because it's all very fresh in your mind. You've gone through, training, and then you're starting to apply these things. And so you want to be able to ask questions. You want to be able to give feedback around what you're doing. And so I think you need to be meeting at least on a weekly basis. I think that's really important. The other thing that I think is really important that goes along with that is there needs to be some type of peer mentor system set up within that organization. It shouldn't just be on, the consultant that you brought in to help fix the problem, but there needs to be something that's happening within that organization. The whole organization can't be full of bad leaders, right? Hopefully there's some people there that will do well. And so we need to understand who those people are. And those people need to take these new leaders and these younger leaders under their wing and help them and support them, and provide them guidance. And, there's many different ways that they can do that. But the fact of it is just most of the time, it really is going to be about that new leader reaching out and saying, hey, how would you deal with this situation? And them sharing how they would deal with it and providing that to them. There needs to be something like that, some type of mentorship happening back and forth. And then I think that mentorship needs to switch often. I think that you shouldn't go for longer than 90 days with the same mentor. I think you need to switch to the next one and learn from them. And there needs to be this opportunity of learning over and over and over from different people within that organization. So definitely in the beginning, once a week, they need some coaching. After, at least 90 days, they need to be moving on to some type of mentorship, and then rotating through that mentor, program, at least for a year there. And then hopefully you've created some really great relationships through your mentoring also, and those will continue on.
I love that. The thing that really jumped out too is that you were talking about the peer mentorship, and I'm sort of gonna steal your words and twist them a little bit. And that is, I just said peer/leadership mentorship. That is, whoever that peer is could just be somebody parallel with you or in the program, but also, and necessarily should be, at least some of the leaders themselves should be those peers. So
Yeah.
it brought up one other question that isn't on the list.
Yeah.
And it is, so given that they want to have that leadership, something I've thought of about exactly this is like, of course you need to have other people in the organization helping each other learn.
Yeah.
In terms of somebody has a question, so not just the leader reaches out and sort of does understanding questions. How do you think we should deal with this?
Yeah.
But when they go, and especially in a psychological safety environment of a good workplace, to be safe for them to ask a question. So when they can say, well, look, I'm stuck. How often or how available should that leadership mentor be? Like, not for long periods of time necessarily, but how often should that mentor be available? Ideally, to help them when they go, well, look, I'm stuck or I'm struggling.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer and I
Yeah.
feel safe enough to say, I don't know.
Yeah.
I need help.
I think that's the biggest thing, Tim, that what you're saying there is they need to know that they have a safe place to say, I'm stuck. I really don't know where to go here. And this needs to be somebody they know that is going to keep, their confidences and allow them to be able to say, I'm failing here. Like I don't know where to go with this. So I love that you bring that up because that is number one and so important. And then I think, we have to be respectful of the other person. The other person has their own world and they have their own job and they have their own things that are going on. And so for me, I think it's important to set time. And so, setting a time, at least 30 minutes to an hour each week with that person. And maybe you won't need it. Maybe that week you're fine. But it's always set aside. Both of you know it's set aside. And maybe it's reciprocal. Maybe you're actually able to help the other person with something that they're stuck on or need some advice around. And so I think just setting that time, at least, that 1 hour a week if needed, I think that's really important. Another concept that I really like to use is called roundtable. It's just a leadership roundtable, and it does not include it's all same level leaders, which it has to be. It can't be anybody that's reporting to anybody else. All of that has to be gone because of what you said. They need to have a safe space that they feel like they can be vulnerable. They can talk about where they're failing. They can talk about where they're struggling. And they know that that's not going to end up on their mid-year or end of year performance review. And so having that roundtable, that's all it is set aside for. There's no other agenda. There's nothing that we need to cover for this and we need to go over for this. Nope. This is just for people to bring up the situations that are happening and then, work through them together, talk through those different situations. Most likely you're having a situation that somebody else is also struggling with. And this is a great time for you, to be able to bring it up and everybody be able to discuss. But it goes back to that such an important concept of people have to feel safe during that. I am not going to speak if I know that something I say in that meeting is going to show up on my mid-year performance review or my end of year performance review. I need to be able to talk these things in a safe way.
I'm a massive proponent of psychological safety. And ironically, though I didn't invent it, I sort of discovered or developed it sort of on my own, like in my classroom, which is where I get most. Like a classroom, you are a leader, whether you like it or not. And it doesn't matter the age of the students, you are a leader. And if you do it badly, it's reflected in your students' performance, and that reflects on you, not them. Definitely. And what I realized, my big mantra was basically, it was all growth mindset. It was like, only trying matters. So I would sometimes tell students things like, is that the best job you're capable of? And not in an accusatory way, just asking them. And almost without exception, they're going, no. It's like, okay, so I want to see you put a little more into it than that.
Yeah.
I made damn sure that they understood. They were safe to say, I don't know. I think that. I'm confident that. Like, give them degrees of certainty because I'm teaching language, but show them that I don't know is not only a desirable answer, but I oftentimes would start the adult teaching classes with that. I would ask them a question I assume nobody knows. Is like, why is the sky blue? Assuming that nobody in the class is as much of a physics and science geek as me to know the answer. And if they do, I'll say, how does myelination affect the speed of networks in your brain? And by which mechanism can you best increase the rate or occurrence of myelination? And I want them to say, what? Literally engineering something they don't know. But I only and usually always do this after saying, okay, ask me any Japanese you want, to prove how incompetent I am at something and how fearless I am to say, I don't know. I don't even know what you said. So
Yeah.
showing them that I am human and also am, I like the way Gary Vee put it. Everybody sucks at something.
Yeah. I love that.
So I want to ask you more question about my extension question, and that is, do you think, and I want you to disagree with me if you do, I want
Okay.
you to be completely honest here, having the ability for them to reach out anytime, like not 7/24, but at work, the
Yeah.
moment it happens that they're struggling, that if the person is at all available to take 30 seconds of their time,
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
you think that would be sort of the ideal paradigm? And if you don't agree, please tell me.
Yeah. I do think it would be the ideal paradigm. I don't know that it's realistic. Just, I know how busy people get. We get so crazy busy, and these back-to-back meetings and from one thing to the next. And so I think that that's the piece that is really tough with that, is how realistic is it. The nice thing about it, though, is that we do have so many ways of connecting with each other. We have so much different technology that we could reach out. And in the workplace, now that you've got a chat system, whether it's through Teams or GChat or Skype, or whatever it is that you're using, it is easy to send somebody a message. And I know for me, I always put it out to my employees that it's like, message me through here. Even if you see that I'm in a meeting, it could be the possibility that that meeting, I don't have to be 100% plugged in, and I can answer you. If I don't answer you, then that I'm not able, I am plugged into this meeting and I need to be present. But there are those meetings, unfortunately, that you're just kind of one foot in. And so I'm always happy to answer. But I think you just have to recognize people's availability, and it's just not not there, unfortunately. And so realistically, I love that idea. Or excuse me, theoretically, I love that idea. I just don't know that it's realistic.
Okay, thank you. While you were saying that, I was thinking about something that James Surowiecki calls idea markets. He's the guy who did a book that's quite famous called The Wisdom of Crowds. So I was thinking, like, sort of on call if you're available, great. If you're not, you're not. And that's a more realistic implementation. But added to that, if it was like, well, you have your one-to-one mentor, but then you can post to the group of either
Yeah.
co-students or a
Yeah.
group of mentors and say, hey, does anybody have any idea? Because the main thing I think of from the neuroscience perspective is the reason that you pairing feedback or learning as closely within fractions of seconds to the behavior you just engaged in
Yeah.
works is because in most cases in evolutionary history, if we did something dumb, we just died. So our brain is exceptionally good as long as the pairing is as close and immediate to the behavior or the challenge we're facing
Yeah.
as possible, exponentially increases the rate of learning. And that's why, when you stick your hand on the element or on the
Yeah.
fire,
Yeah.
it doesn't take 5 minutes to get the message because our ancestors would have been dead long before it was of use.
Yes.
So extending that to learning, if somebody can get an answer within seconds for that question when it's salient and visceral to them,
Yeah.
their rate of learning would be.
Yeah. That
Okay,
makes total sense. Yeah.
I've only got 2 more questions. I really appreciate your incredible answers. And I know you're not faking it because your answers are amazing, that you are actually a leader. So how do you envision, let's see this. I'm just going to read it as is. I'm not sure I love the wording, but how do you envision a course helping you address specific leadership challenges within your organization? Now, if you've already answered this, and I think you have,
Yeah.
just say asked and answered.
Yeah. I would go back to that roundtable. To me, that like providing a roundtable for leaders to be able to come in without their, leaders in there, again, a safe space where they're able to collaborate and talk and speak freely and, talk through these things. I think that's where I would really direct it towards is having something like that where they can discuss and have that discussion back and forth. And even if they're not fully comfortable speaking up, there is going to be somebody within that session who is going to bring up something similar to what you're experiencing. And for you to be able to talk that back and forth, I think it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I love that.
All about bringing people together to collaborate. I think it makes a huge difference when you bring human beings together to talk about things.
Well, not only under the right conditions rather than the wrong conditions are groups smarter. In fact, there was research that showed that getting a group of specialists, so they got the smartest people in a large sample who were they were literally the best people out of that sample at math. So they were the math gods of the group, and they put them in a group, and then they randomly assigned everybody else. So all the other groups were just not the top 10 or not the top group. And by random assignment, you get diversity. And what they found is diversity overwhelms and outperforms singular expertise in math questions. So what they're the geniuses at, 90% of the time, diversity outperforms expertise because of the lack of diversity in that superpowered math geek group, where you might have a much narrower swath of experience because it isn't like a kindergarten teacher and a scientist. It's a bunch of physics or math geeks who that's all they do. And like I said, they get their butts handed to them 90% of the time from these groups who are purely nothing but diverse. So
yeah, that's interesting.
I couldn't agree more. So considering the potential impact on your organization, what pricing model, so this is more specific towards an actual course, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, would you find the most appealing for a course? So, subscription, one-time fee with some kind of accountability or performance-based pricing. What kind of things make the most sense for you as a leader if you brought in an outside organization to do this kind of training or to collaborate with you to do?
Yeah. It's a good question. I don't know that I've got the best answer for you, but to me, I would say a one-time fee. And really I would just want to know how much I'm, going to be expensing for this and what's the amount, and then I can expense it and move along. And so that's nothing fancy around it. I just think that that's what would work best for me.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense, right? Like ongoing, it might have to be a subscription, but you can do a lot of stuff internal. If they're good at what they do and they're ethical about what they'll do, they're saying, well, part of our training will include setting up the roundtables or something like it, those entities that you were talking about.
Yeah.
So very last one, and this is it, is who do you know, if you know somebody in your network or somebody else who would be hopefully as kick-ass at doing an interview like this as you, but they don't have to be because they're only mortals and they didn't have your dad. If you know somebody else who you would be willing to introduce me to, or just say, well, take a look at this guy, and if you want to do the interview, I just want to get as large a sample group as I can, as much wisdom as I can. Bless you.
Are you specific around leadership then? Are you wanting somebody who specific to leadership, or do you have other topics that you're wanting to?
It is leadership, but leadership in the direction of, so let's say, for example, and I'm still working on my language, but I would say something like, for me, I train or help leaders to build, and then all the benefits of having a culture, right? Attract, foster, find, filter, find, and retain top talent through culture building or through culture development. So that's it. It's like, I want to take the top people and with them or their senior leadership have the greatest impact, because I'm dealing with people who influence a lot of other people. Right at the top, so that then they can change. You go, well, no wonder we've been losing so many people. We treat them like carbon-based profit units, and we don't even know their names, right? So really, it's specifically how culture building could cure or certainly improve almost everything that's wrong with most companies, especially big companies. That if it was fixed, it would have, in your own words, basically incalculable value long term. So mostly leaders, and particularly those interested in building culture to solve a lot of leadership problems or to improve their companies.
Definitely. I'm sure I do. I will definitely think about it. And if you're okay, I'll just send you a message with any referrals that I can think of. But yeah, I'm sure I've got somebody in my network that I could send your way.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Well, I got to say, it has been a real pleasure. And I'm so excited that by talking about relationships and the power of those, I just reached back to my network, connected with, I'm thinking it's a French name, but I can't remember. The person who introduced us, because this is the first time. Fabio, right. Who introduced us. And it's interesting how we've had a deeper discussion than we've ever had since the introduction happened. But the power of bringing people together, right? It was like, I'm looking for people who do this. And, you know, the whole Ben Franklin effect, the fact that he went, sure, I'll connect you with somebody has deepened our relationship. And this is what it really comes down to. The culture is about building relationships and psychological safety and growth mindset and all that stuff that makes us all better.
Yes, I agree. It's pretty crazy, right?
It's amazing. And I feel all warm and fuzzy. So it has been a pleasure. Please stay in touch via LinkedIn. And, you know, conversely, if you have any requests or need help, I'm really straightforward. If it's like, I have no idea, I will tell you that. If I have an idea, I will absolutely support you any way I can, especially in return for your kindness, but independent of that too.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it, Tim.
Thank you so much, Marcee. It was an incredible pleasure.
Have a great rest of your day. Thanks.
You too. Bye-bye.